zero accent, can be best defined if you go out, in general and average, and around Denver, Colorado. I just love the way people talk there. Maybe I just have no flavor and that's boring, and that's the way I like it. I mean, I don't like my mashed potatoes with a bunch of salt and bacon and shit on them. Just give me the potatoes, a little brown gravy. We're good to go here. Am I right? Yeah, I think I am.
Brutish and short. 5 things. Solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Richie, what's that pony doing up there? Well, this was my pony before a janitor erased it at the end of last year. Rest in peace, my pony. But this actually comes from an acronym that my students came up with. If it helps you, great. If it doesn't, whatever. Super ponies need back scratches. Super ponies. That's a super pony right there. So super ponies need back scratches. Solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So the idea here is that we need a ruler who is strong enough that he is beyond challenge, that people think I could not possibly mess with that guy, because that is the only thing that keeps us from tearing each other apart. That this Leviathan, who is so large, you can see him looming large over everything, larger than the city, and you see that his garments, his chainmail is made of people, and he's so big as to be beyond challenge, and that will make us behave ourselves when we otherwise would not, and it will keep us from destroying one another. And this comes down to Hobbes's view of human nature, which really isn't that far away from John Calvin's, who said that man is totally depraved and incapable of really doing any good unless his heart is quickened by the Holy Spirit. And
Calvin and Hobbes?
Kind of the inspiration for the Calvin and Hobbes cartoon. These two philosophers, one religious, one political, that tend to think like each other when it comes to human nature.
Yes,
they have a very
I do predict shit. I have not heard this
clip. Then again, we might say, oh, well, yeah, I trust people. I generally think that people are good, kind of in the vein of the Italian Renaissance humanist. But Hobbes asked, if you think so much of people and you trust your fellow man so much, why do you lock your door? And everybody says, oh, yeah. Think about it. How about give me your social security
Nobody
number?
says that.
Just send me an email, tr@tomritchie.net. Tweet it to me, @TomRitchie. Let the whole world see it. I mean, what do you have to fear by giving out your private information? Wait, what? You don't trust me? Good call. Because really, if it weren't for the law and all of that stuff, I would be the first person to slit your throat and drink your blood for breakfast. Actually, I wouldn't drink your blood because that would make me a vampire. And if I were a vampire, I would not be able to drink this.
This dude's a little fuck.
But anyway, yeah, humans can be pretty cruel at times. Now, keep in mind that Hobbes is specifically writing against the backdrop of the English Civil War. Hobbes saw absolute government in England break down and lead to this long civil war, at the end of which the king is beheaded. We see the end of civil government as we know it. And so Hobbes didn't really see any evidence that people can live together without some sort of absolute authority binding them down. So remember that Hobbes doesn't see this as God wills absolute government, but just that absolute government is the only way that we will survive without.
And the problem with that is history, isn't it? Human beings, depending on how you want to divvy up, when the, different species were changing, have been around roughly for 300,000 years, okay? Longer if you go back to like Lucy, you're into the millions of years. And coming from typical mammalian familial, that's not familiar, familial backgrounds, We learned to work in groups. We learned to work in teams. We fought for stuff we wanted. We had competition. But we didn't kill everybody. So how could Hobbes think that suddenly now, if we don't have a government telling us exactly what to do, we'd never make it? When you've got a couple of million years of history, you need to look at and say, it seems we could. Because if that were true, then how would any species make it? If they absolutely, positively must have somebody in the driving seat issuing orders on how they may behave. What a weird thing to say. I'm just going to let it keep going.
Okay, now let's talk for a bit about John Locke's philosophical constitutionalism. Constitutionalism, as we've already talked about in another lecture, is the limitation of government by law. And constitutionalism is what eventually won out in England, and John Locke was its biggest advocate. He outlined his constitutionalist philosophy in his 2 treatises of government, published in 1689. Remember that title, Great FRQ Fodder. And he is writing in defense of constitutionalism. And in this, John Locke is talking about natural rights, which he believed that God gave to Adam in the book of Genesis. So keep in mind that Locke is using a biblical justification for his argument in addition to logic. And so he believed that God gave Adam natural rights and thus gave these natural rights to every human being. These natural rights are life, liberty, and property. Now remember, pursuit of happiness, this is Jefferson trying to change the wording around a little bit so that he doesn't get caught on turnitin.com or whatever. So he's only partially plagiarizing Locke. But these natural rights are given to human beings, but it's very difficult for us to defend them in the state of nature. I can say all I...
And let me just cut him off right there. This whole thing about plagiarism, let me tell you something. When you come up with an idea, or someone you've read comes up with an idea, and you've heard that idea before, and they don't mention the source for the idea, that does not mean that they're plagiarizing. First of all, just about every thought you can have that doesn't involve modern technology has already been thought and said by somebody. Very difficult to come up with original thoughts, okay? People have been around a long time. They did a shitload of thinking. The chances that you've discovered something brand new, unless it has to do with a modern medical or technological breakthrough, very, very slim. So when you hear somebody say something, and I'm going to differentiate between 2 types of people here, and you think you've heard it before, it doesn't mean they're plagiarizing. Now, if you hear somebody say something and you know that it came from someone else, and they don't give that person credit, and you know when someone's making something sound like it's theirs, you can tell. Some people do this it's a lifestyle. They will literally act like, here's an example. What was the phrase that got popular around, I'm going to say the mid-1990s? It was something like this. And I've said this on a show before. People were talking about aliens. And they would say, it is the height of arrogance to think we're the only species in the universe. Well, that's a nifty little saying, isn't it? Very powerful. The problem is, once somebody came up with it, I don't know who really actually put those words in that sequence. Once somebody came up with it, everybody started using it as if it were their own. Because it is nifty. It's got a little impact to it. And it went right on up to the astrophysicist. I mean, the most recent person I heard use it was Neil deGrasse Tyson. Acting like, it's the presentation. See, what I would have said if I were him is, as we've heard before, it is the height of arrogance to think we're the only species in the universe. That's what I would have said. Because it's a little too clever sounding for you to not give the attribution to at least a prior source, if not a specific prior source. I don't like when people do that. It's the same kind of concept as taking the credit for others' work. Do you know people that do that? I've known people in my life, I'm not thinking of any off the top of my head, that routinely, bosses especially, when the big boss would come around, would take credit for shit you did. And I almost didn't mind that What I minded is when they were taking credit for my ideas as if they'd come up with it. That would fucking enrage me at a team meeting or something. And I've given, this good idea on how to run shit, and, oh yeah, I was thinking, da 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 da. No, you weren't thinking that till I told you about it. Those are the kinds of people I'm talking about. So if you've got a real clever saying that you've heard someone else say and you like to use a lot, you should probably kick them an attribution once in a while, don't you think? At least establish that it was not something you came up with in your own head. Plagiarism, I bet 9 cases out of 10, it's not plagiarized unless the first person plagiarized it. I mean, it's just people can think the same thoughts over again without knowing about the other person's thought. It's fucking ridiculous when you really break it down.
Want that I've got a right to be alive, I've got a right to be free, I've got a right to the fruits of my labor, but in the state of nature, somebody can just come take that away from me. So people get involved in a social contract in order to preserve what they can of their life, liberty, and property. And it's the government's job to protect these natural rights. The whole point of government is so that we can enjoy these things to a greater extent than we would if we didn't have government. So this government can be limited by law. And furthermore, if this government is not preserving the lives, the liberties, the properties of their citizens, then the citizens have a right of revolution. They have a right to overthrow the government. This is why Jefferson is making so much use of Locke in the Declaration of Independence. This is all about Locke's philosophy, that when government has failed to protect natural rights, then the people can revert back to the state of nature. They may alter or abolish their government, as Jefferson says, so that they can recreate the government in a way that will better protect the lives, liberties, and properties of.
See, I fully agree with this. This is something, I'm not encouraging anarchy. For one thing, we need a system of laws in place. And I think, I know a lot of very smart thinkers who disagree with me that the majority should make the decisions. But I believe in majority rule. I mean, as long as it's feasible, as long as it doesn't line up against the pursuit of a healthy, non-attacked life, the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all of the things we see in the Bill of Rights, we should have those guaranteed. And I was talking to a person I was working at a job up in Vermont, and I had to drive 72.4, I measured it, 72.4 miles one way to work, hills, all that. And a shitty Chevy Malibu. It was pretty new, but they fucking suck. I'm sorry. American cars have never treated me well. I've just never had luck with them. They've always blown up or broken. And that's a shame. I would love to say, look at my American car. It's so loaded with high-quality craftsmanship and smart thinking in the design. But no, you got to go to Japan or Germany for that. Sad thing. Don't want that to be true, but it is. No, maybe it'll change. So I was talking to this lady, and I worked in IT, which I worked in IT for quite a few companies. Information technology, the guys that come fix your computer, that kind of thing, do the backups, run all the network stuff. So I went in there, and I was working on this lady's computer, very intelligent lady. She worked in R&D, and somehow we got talking about the government. And this would have been right about the year, this would have been right about 2000, 2001. It might have actually been after 9/11. No, it was before 9/11. It was definitely before 9/11. She goes, Kevin, in this country, we have right now, and I think we always will have, the power that we need among the people to overthrow our government if necessary. And that's a comforting feeling. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what she said. And I thought about that. And I like that. I think we need to keep that ace in the hole. But let me tell you something. I mean, we can still do it right now. America, if we decide to rise up, if we just absolutely have to overthrow our government, which I don't think we will because they tend to respond to threats pretty well, real threats, yeah, they'll change shit so you don't have to overthrow them. They'd rather keep their power and just do what you say. But if we have to, we can. Now, they're getting some pretty powerful weapons. National Guard, police forces, our own military, to the point they might have to control us, riot control, stuff like that. That's something else we should talk about. The difference between biker gang shootouts and riots. Not a whole lot of difference. If you're engaging in criminal behavior, you're engaging in criminal behavior. I'm tired of hearing people. I'm tired of the argument on both sides. So let me drift off for a second. One is, where's all the outrage now that these biker gangs have killed each